Hello YouTube. One of the videos on my old channel that was really interesting that's lost now is where I was talking about prison-based martial arts. Now, I was going to reshoot the whole video thing simply because I got talking to some of the 52 Blocks guys, and apparently what I thought about 52 Blocks wasn't 100% correct. So I'm going to take the time to change that now. First of all, 52 Blocks and Jailhouse Rock both claim to be martial arts descendant from African tribal martial arts. The problem is that African tribal martial arts were not very well codified. So there's a lot of differences between one group and the next. It's kind of like saying you practice Native American martial arts. Well, the Cherokee fought differently from the Apache, who fought differently from the Navajo, who fought differently from the Sioux. And even though these were very large tribes and they had a lot of similar tactics, there was also a lot of things about them that was very different. So this is something you have to understand when you're talking about these martial arts. Now, the problem with this is, and I give the 52 Blocks guys credit where credit is due. The problem with this is that when you start talking about Jailhouse Rock, Jailhouse Rock originated with the Black Guerrilla family. And whether or not it is or isn't descendant from African tribal-based martial arts really doesn't matter because of how it was used. The means at which that the African tribal-based martial art was used was a way of training so-called street soldiers. Now, you have to understand something here. That's not totally what any African martial art is about. So you can't judge all African-based martial arts simply because these guys, heavily influenced by Marxism and Leninism, which became a very big part of a lot of the militant culture and a lot of the civil rights back in the 60s and 70s, and is still there today, that you have to understand that the way it worked was you learn a few basic empty hand techniques, and you have to earn your place as a so-called soldier. Then once you do, then they teach you something a little bit more advanced. Knife fighting. Then they teach you something a little bit more advanced in context of the knife fighting. And they go on to and on and on and on. The higher you get in the system, the more you have to be indoctrinated into that system. Now, bear in mind, when the Black Guerrilla family started trying to take over America through the prison system, that caused a backlash. A Irish biker gang, which was already well established long before the words Aryan Brotherhood were ever spoken, manifested into the Aryan Brotherhood, and they created rock and roll as a kind of a counterculture, counter-training regiment for what was going on with the Black Guerrilla family. Now, you have to bear in mind that the Black Guerrilla family's hook was, we have an African-based martial art, and whether or not they actually, the martial art itself can be traced to Africa or not, really doesn't matter, because they were using it as a way of separating black inmates from white inmates. If you were black, you were obviously from Africa, and therefore they would teach you these secret African fighting techniques, and you would be one step closer to being African and realizing your potential as a human being. What happens is that created a counterculture which was already in place. This Irish biker gang, whose name is lost, became the Aryan Brotherhood, and they started teaching their methods and adapting their methods as a counter movement against the Black Guerrilla family. And what happened is a whole history of violence, wars in prison, and then when these inmates get out, if some of these inmates get out, they're out on the street. They recruit younger people, they train them in a little bit of stuff, same indoctrination process. If you want more, you have to further the organization, which furthering the organization is great, except the problem is the head of the organization is the one who is benefiting the most. Cults work the same way. You actually have to look at this in a context of actually being a cult. Gangs, certain martial arts organizations, terrorist cells all work as a cult. You learn more the more you are indoctrinated into the system of serving the organization, and the more you serve the organization, the more you learn. However, you have to make a great deal of sacrifices and everything else to get there, and the sacrifices become a process of indoctrination. They cut you out from having information from other sources. In the case of the Aryan Brotherhood, they simply went back to old school military tactics. Being that Fairborn, or I'm sorry, Fairbairn, and Stykes and several others were white, they went to modern military tactics, and they weren't claiming something from some ancient Celtic tradition or some ancient Aryan tradition. They were claiming to be the master race and to have the most advanced form of combat because it was created by other white people who were, of course, the master race. And as you see the propaganda in this, the whole point is that you have indoctrination and training. Now, not all criminals are trained. Not all criminals are part of an organization. Many of those who are simply lack the training. A good example is that the Aryan Brotherhood recruits out of the Nazi lowriders. So you have to prove yourself as a Nazi lowrider before you can even be accepted or even be recruited into the Aryan Brotherhood. The Black Guerrilla family has been known to do this through the Crips, the Bloods, and various other smaller gangs. And when you understand that these people are indoctrinated into a process of thought, into a process of behavior which limits what they can and cannot do, you come to understand that you're not dealing with a human being, you're dealing with a system of indoctrination. And the reason I say you're not dealing with a human being is because when the group identity takes over, the individual identity is lost. You're not dealing with the human being, you're dealing with the group identity. And this is that type of cult mentality which you've seen at Jonestown with the Heaven's Gate people and several other cults throughout the world where everyone has killed themselves because they thought they were doing the greater good or serving some divine purpose or something like that. This is just a basic overview. I'm going to get into it a little bit more detailed later and some of the more psychological elements of it later. But this is a basic little overview of what's to come.